Assalamu alaikum. Today we are going to study what is forensic linguistics. We all know that um, linguistics is the study of language, which is the scientific study of language, and we call it scientific study because we look into the aspects of language from the scientific perspective. Forensic linguistics is actually the analysis of language, which is related to the law or anything which has to do with the legal discourse. It can be the interpretation of a police case or an interrogation audio or a suicide note or the language of lawyers or statements which are recorded by the police officers or by the witnesses or by the criminals themselves. So, forensic linguistics is the study of all these legal discourse. Language, we know that language is evidence and it includes the attribution of authorship. By this term, authorship, it's very important to for you to at this point understand what is authorship. Authorship is who wrote the text, whether the person who's saying something is is it really what the person intends, or is it just what other people have asked him or her to state. So authorship is very important when it comes to forensic linguistics, because if there is a suicide note and we want to understand whether this suicide note is truly written by the person himself or herself, or is it just to fabricate something, or it is just to tamper with the evidence and someone has faked a suicide note, who's and is written by the murderer himself or herself. So authorship is very important because language is evidence. Every individual has their own way of communicating, and therefore forensic linguistics is concerned with finding those evidences in order to solve these cases. It is also the study where we see the interpretation of meaning, whether when someone said something, what do they intend by saying that. It is also the part of forensic linguistics. Language as a legal discourse includes the language of statutes, judicial deliberations, the discourse of the courtroom, and the discourse of the exchanges between the lawyers and the outside the courtroom. Forensic linguistics have also studied wide range of interactions which have taken place within the prison or even outside the prison, and also in the within the police service. And they have analyzed whether there are any differences in the language used in the prisons and outside the prisons. And there's a new emerging aspect of forensic linguistics and that is the interpretation of legal terminologies. As we know that, you know, it is the study of the language of law. So what is language of law? When we uh, when we speak of the language of law, we are actually talking about a number of aspects of legal language, which we have already discussed. That is of court, of police officers, of criminals and witnesses, and all these. um, we can divide the language of law into two main sections. One is the professional language of the law, and the other is the language of the law encountered by the layperson. So, for example, if there is a layperson who does not understand the language of law, but the lawyers, they do understand the language, the professional language. So, the terminologies that they are using, only they are aware of that. For instance, doctors, when they try to talk to their patients are laymen, and when they're talking to their patients, they normally use usual terminologies which are not professional language, and which is not related to exactly the terminologies which are there in their professional language. So the doctors are using conversation which is uh, easily comprehensible for the patient. So these, similarly with there, when there are terminology, there's this division of language of doctors, there's this language of law as well. So there are certain terminologies which are only understood by the police officers or by the professionals in the field. However, there are certain terminologies or language which is understood by the layman, and layman cannot understand that language. um, we do come across a time or conversations or studies where there is this overlap between the two, because you can obviously, you cannot separate both completely. So it is um, this mix of both, which so boundaries are fuzzy. So a forensic linguist actually deals with both of these professional languages, as well as the language which is associated with the layman. uh, we know that from when there is a verdict which is given by a jury, so we cannot directly call that verdict a wrong verdict. The reason is that we know that the decision is taken by the jury, and the judge is only the person who is just telling it to the people. um, in that case, we this can also come under the scope of the study of forensic linguistics. So the students of forensic linguistics needs to bear in mind that although we talk of the language of law, um, and there is this very important uh, part of that language which is hidden from us. So when the judge tells the verdict, gives the verdict, the we don't know what the jury said, we don't know what the jury decided, we don't know what was the conversation between them, whether they argued, whether they did not argue, how many of them, like what was the language used behind that. So it's important to know that in forensic linguistics there is a lot of data which is not given for the analysis because of the secrecy. So there are certain limitations when it comes to the analysis of the uh, language. The discourse of law. Um, Studying the language of the law, it requires us to consider what happens linguistically at every phase of a case. So when we are looking at a case, we are actually looking at all the interactions between the people, not just one incident. So for example, if there is a case that is being solved when it comes to the language of law, we need to look at whether what was the conversation between the police officers, how what was the conversation during the interview between the lawyers, between their clients. Because if you look at the conversation of a lawyer of the lawyer with the client, you'd see that the client is going to be very open with the lawyer. The lawyer knows that my client has committed the murder, but they are the only two people who knows about that, and the rest of them are unknown. The rest of them, the rest of them, it is unknown whether the person has committed the crime or not. So the conversation of the client with the lawyer is completely different from the conversation of the client when with the lawyer when there are other parties present in the court. Uh, Similarly, The language of the court is also very important for the uh, for uh, for the analysis. It is like we can also go for the analysis in the discourse of law. We can also go for the analysis of of the conversation between the judge and the lawyers as well. Though we have this availability of forensic analysis, however, there are certain linguistic advantages and disadvantages to that. And first among them is the authorship attribution. Authorship attribution is, as I've already told you, that authorship attribution is that when a single document is written, so the question is raised whether that document, because you don't know right now who has written that document, whether it's a statement, whether it's a suicide note, whether it's a police officer's interview, anything like that. You, who's the writer of that document, or mm, who's the creator of that document or that argument? Uh, that is actually the authorship attribution, where the forensic linguist is is facing certain problem. So it has its own advantages as well as disadvantages. A document is it can be written by one person or it can be written by multiple authors. You never know whether it is written by one person or whether it is written by the other person. You may also not know whether it is written by the same person who claims that it belongs to him or her, or whether it is written by someone else. Similarly, we don't know whether the document under question is an official document or not, or is it just something that is the mouthpiece for the person who actually takes the responsibility of the document, or uh, the writer is a different person, uh, who's not exactly the same person who takes the responsibility of the document. What makes it easy for the forensic linguist is to understand um, that the creator of this document is to be um, it, is is found through the help of language. So you might have heard of this copyright thing. So copyright thing is actually something which is associated with this authorship attribution, because when someone wants to know um, the authorship, it's in question, whether someone has written it or not. It has happened that previously there were cases like where a person took like there was a very unethical kind of book or document which was published, and then the name of the person was written on that, and because it was very unethical, so the name of the person, whoever wrote the name of the person, and this person wasn't even aware of it, that whether his name is on that document which was published, and they were punished for that. Now, if you have not written something and you are punished for that, obviously it is something which is very devastating. So for that purpose, even in that scenarios, we can use this authorship attribution. You compare the language of one person with the question text. So for example, if someone has written something else, we try to compare the same language with the other person's language, and eventually we get to know whether this person has actually written this text or not. Okay. So and there is this in this example, there are these two statements of a constable, and their names are not mentioned. This highlighted or the bold typed is actually the similar phrases of one statement with the other. Now we all know that it's impossible for two people to write the same kind of language, because if you are writing something, there's somehow certain differences when you're writing it. However, if the other person is writing, there will obviously be differences. But if you look at these two examples in these two texts, you'll see that the bold portions, you'd see that only in certain places some synonyms are used, and the rest of it is completely copied. So see, registration number is written like this, and the registration number is written in short form, and color and type is same. So from this we can see that any one of them has written the text and the other has exactly copied it. So it is not the true representation of what actually happened, but it is a statement which is a copy statement from one to the other, just like you people copy your assignments. So this is how a forensic linguist gets to know that it is copied.